The old, creaky doors of the bank groaned as Emily Dawson pushed them open, stepping inside with her heart pounding in her chest. The air smelled of polished wood and faint cologne, a stark contrast to the exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. She clutched the strap of her worn-out purse, knuckles white from the grip, her other hand protectively holding the tiny fingers of her 6-year-old daughter, Lily. Lily looked up at her mother with wide, innocent eyes. "Mommy, will they help us today?" Emily forced a smile, though her stomach twisted into knots. "Of course, sweetheart." She had to believe that. She had no other choice. The line moved slowly, and every second felt like an eternity. She could feel the stares, the judgment in the glances of the well-dressed customers around her. She wasn't like them, no expensive jewelry, no designer bags. Just a mother fighting to keep a roof over her daughter's head. Finally, it was her turn. She stepped forward, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Next," a voice called. Emily approached the counter where a young bank teller with neatly combed hair and an impersonal smile greeted her. "How can I help you today?" She hesitated, then placed a stack of neatly organized documents on the counter. "I'm here to apply for a personal loan." The teller barely glanced at her before nodding. "Take a seat. A loan officer will be with you shortly." Emily took Lily's hand and led her to the waiting area. The seats were hard, the fabric scratchy. She could hear the faint hum of printers and the occasional click of high heels against the marble floor. Minutes turned into an hour. Lily rested her head against Emily's shoulder, her tiny breaths warm against her skin. Just as Emily was about to ask what was taking so long, a voice called out, "Ms. Dawson." She stood quickly, straightening her blouse. The man who had called her name was in his late 30s, with slicked-back dark hair and a sharp navy suit. His name tag read, Mr. Randall Hawthorne, Senior Loan Manager. Emily extended her hand, but Randall barely acknowledged it, already walking toward his office. She followed, her pulse quickening. Inside, Randall gestured for her to sit while he took a seat behind his grand mahogany desk. The room was pristine, with a faint scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. He opened her file, flipping through the pages with an air of disinterest. "You're applying for a loan of $15,000, he stated. Emily nodded. "Yes, for rent and some urgent expenses. I have a job. I can pay it back in installments." Randall held up a hand, silencing her. He continued skimming through her documents, his expression unreadable. Then, without even looking up, he spoke. "I'm sorry, Ms. Dawson, but we can't approve your request." Emily's breath hitched. "What? Why?" Randall closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. "Your financial history is unstable. You have no assets, no strong collateral, and your previous credit record isn't promising. You're a risk." Her hands trembled. "But I have a stable job now. I've never missed rent. I just need help to get back on my feet." Randall exhaled sharply. "I understand your situation, but the bank has policies. If we made exceptions for everyone..." Emily clenched her fists. She had fought too hard, sacrificed too much to be dismissed like this. "Please, Mr. Hawthorne, I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a chance." His expression didn't change. Cold, indifferent. "I'm sorry, but the answer is no." Tears burned at the back of her eyes. She had been so sure this would work. "Mommy!" Lily's small voice broke through the tension. Emily turned to see her daughter standing by the door, clutching her stuffed bunny, eyes brimming with confusion. She had promised Lily things would get better. Emily stood, swallowing her pride. "Thank you for your time." As she reached for her documents, Randall sighed. "I can suggest alternative financial assistance programs. But a loan from us? It's out of the question." Nodding stiffly, Emily gathered her papers. But just as she was about to leave, Randall glanced at her ID one last time, and then he froze. His hand, which had been flipping through the file so carelessly moments ago, suddenly stiffened. His eyes widened, darting between the ID and Emily's face, his skin going pale. Something was very, very wrong. Like, share, subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Randall Hawthorne's fingers trembled slightly as he held Emily's ID, his sharp blue eyes darting between the plastic card and the woman standing before him. The smug confidence he had exuded moments ago drained from his face like ink spreading through water. Emily noticed. Her grip tightened on Lily's tiny hand as unease slithered up her spine. The sudden shift in Randall's demeanor was unmistakable. His breathing had changed, his posture had stiffened. He was staring at her ID as if he had just seen a ghost. A long, suffocating silence settled between them. The distant hum of the bank, the muffled voices of customers and tellers, all faded into background noise. Then Randall swallowed hard. His voice, once firm and dismissive, now carried an unfamiliar edge. "Ms. Dawson." He cleared his throat, but his voice remained unsteady. "Are you absolutely sure this is your real name?" Emily frowned. "What kind of question is that?" Randall's grip on the ID tightened. His pulse throbbed visibly in his neck, a bead of sweat forming at his temple. He stopped himself, inhaling sharply. "You're certain your full name is Emily Catherine Dawson?" She hesitated, her heart hammering. "Of course it is. Why would I lie about my own name?" Randall opened his mouth, then closed it. His fingers twitched as he pulled his computer screen slightly closer, typing something frantically. His pupils darted across the monitor, absorbing information Emily couldn't see. Lily tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Emily forced a gentle smile, though her skin prickled with unease. "Nothing, sweetheart. We're just talking." Randall suddenly pushed his chair back, his knees nearly knocking against the desk. The sudden movement startled Emily, but what unsettled her more was the way his hands shook as he removed his reading glasses. I need a moment," he muttered, standing abruptly. Emily's stomach twisted. "A moment for what?" Randall didn't answer. Instead, he turned and strode toward the office door, pausing just long enough to glance back at her. His expression was unreadable, a mix of shock, disbelief, and something else, something dangerously close to fear. Without another word, he stepped out, leaving Emily frozen in her chair. Seconds stretched into minutes. Emily clutched her purse, her mind racing. What had just happened? Why had he reacted like that? She could still see the way his face had drained of color, as if her name alone had struck some deep, buried nerve. Lily climbed into her lap, curling against her mother's chest. "Mommy, can we go home?" Emily kissed the top of her daughter's head, stroking her soft curls. "Soon, baby. Soon." The office door creaked open again. Emily's muscles tensed as she turned, expecting Randall. But it wasn't him. A woman now stood in the doorway. Tall, slender, with striking gray eyes and a perfectly tailored charcoal blazer. The kind of woman whose presence demanded attention. Her name tag read Victoria Sterling, Regional Bank Director. Emily's breath hitched. Victoria stepped forward, her gaze never leaving Emily's face. "Ms. Dawson," she said, her voice smooth but laced with something unreadable. "Could I have a word with you?" Emily exchanged a confused glance with Lily before nodding. "Of course." Victoria's eyes flickered to Lily, and for a brief second, something softened in her gaze. Then she turned to one of the assistants outside the door. "Please take the child to the lobby. There are coloring books and snacks." Emily stiffened. "I'd rather she stay with me." Victoria offered a practiced smile. "I promise, she'll be safe." Emily hesitated but eventually nodded. "Lily, go with the nice lady, okay?" Lily looked uncertain but obeyed, following the bank assistant out of the office. The door clicked shut behind them, and then the air changed. Victoria sat across from Emily, folding her hands on the desk. "You need to tell me the truth," she said, her voice quieter now but firm. "Who are you?" Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Excuse me?" Victoria leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Your name. Your real name." Emily's heart pounded. I already told you." Victoria exhaled, rubbing her temple. "Emily Catherine Dawson. Born April 3, 1994. Moved to this city 6 years ago. Single mother. She looked up. Is that correct? Emily swallowed. Yes, that's me. Victoria studied her face, then reached into a folder on the desk. She pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the polished surface. Then explain this. Emily hesitated before looking down. And when she did, her breath left her in a sharp, stunned gasp. Her own photo stared back at her. But the name beneath it was different. Not Emily Dawson. Not even close. A name she hadn't seen in years. A name she had buried. A name that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. A name that could ruin everything. Emily's hands trembled as she pushed the paper away. Where did you get this? Victoria's sharp gaze didn't waver. That doesn't matter. What matters is why your real identity was flagged in our system. Emily's pulse roared in her ears. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not after everything she had done to escape. Emily's hands trembled as she clenched the arms of her chair. The weight of her past pressed against her chest, suffocating, inescapable. My name used to be Sophia Hayes. The words barely made it past her lips. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition? Curiosity? It was impossible to tell. I changed it 6 years ago, Emily continued, her voice uneven. I had to. Victoria leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. Why? Emily swallowed hard. Because if I hadn't, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. And neither would my daughter. A heavy silence settled between them. Victoria exhaled through her nose, tapping her fingers against the desk. You understand why this concerns us, right? Changing your identity isn't illegal. But the fact that your old name flagged something in our system means there's more to this story. Emily's jaw tightened. I know. Victoria studied her carefully. Tell me everything. Emily hesitated. The past was a place she never wanted to visit again. But the way things were going, she might not have a choice. Taking a shaky breath, she started. 6 years ago, I was married to a man named Daniel Hayes. She forced herself to say his name, though just the sound of it made her stomach twist. On the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. But behind closed doors, she shook her head. It was a nightmare. Victoria remained silent, letting her continue. He controlled every aspect of my life. Who I talked to, where I went, what I wore. He tracked my phone, monitored my emails. He isolated me from my friends, my family, everyone. Emily's voice wavered, but she pushed through. And when I got pregnant with Lily, it got worse. Victoria's lips pressed into a thin line. The night I left, he almost... Emily stopped, closing her eyes for a moment before continuing. I knew if I didn't run, I wouldn't make it out alive. A lump formed in her throat, but she swallowed it down. I changed my name, moved across the country. I did everything right. I thought I was safe. Victoria's gaze was unreadable. Then why is your old name still in our system? Emily's fingers dug into her lap. I don't know. Maybe he's looking for me. Maybe he never stopped. A muscle in Victoria's jaw twitched. She stood abruptly, walking to the filing cabinet across the room. She flipped through a folder, then pulled out a sheet of paper. When she returned to the desk, she slid it toward Emily. Emily hesitated before looking down. Her stomach dropped. It was a bank transaction, from this very branch. And the name on the account, Daniel Hayes. Her breath caught. No, that's not possible. Victoria's voice was calm, but firm. He was here 3 days ago, trying to access accounts under the name Sophia Hayes. Emily's pulse roared in her ears. He knows. Her worst nightmare had just come true. Emily's body went cold. Her hands gripped the edges of the paper so tightly that it crumpled under her fingers. She read the name again. Daniel Hayes. He had been here, at this very bank. 3 days ago. Her mind raced. How did he find her? She had done everything right. Changed her name, moved to a town where no one knew her, never used anything that could be traced back to Sophia Hayes. And yet, here she was, exposed. She looked up at Victoria, her breath uneven. What did he say when he was here? Victoria hesitated, watching Emily closely. He claimed his wife had stolen money from him years ago, and that he had reason to believe she had an account under a different name at this bank. He asked if there were any records of Sophia Hayes. Emily's stomach twisted. And? What did you tell him? Victoria's eyes darkened. We told him we had no accounts under that name. Relief washed over Emily for a fleeting second before panic gripped her again. But if he came here, that means he's close. It means he knows where I am. Victoria nodded. It's possible. Emily's heart pounded as she tried to piece it all together. There must have been a reason he suspected this bank specifically. Did he say anything else? Victoria leaned forward, lowering her voice. He didn't just suspect this bank. He suspected me. Emily's breath hitched. What? Victoria exhaled, glancing around as if making sure no one else was listening. He showed me a picture of you, or rather Sophia Hayes. He asked if I had ever seen you before. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. I told him no, Victoria continued, but I think he knew I was lying. Emily swallowed hard. Why would you lie for me? Victoria's expression hardened. Because I know what men like him are capable of. Silence stretched between them, heavy and unspoken. Emily's pulse throbbed at the base of her throat. So what do I do now? Victoria's gaze sharpened. You need to leave. Immediately. Emily's heart clenched. I can't. I have Lily. I can't just pick up and run again. We have nothing. Victoria hesitated for only a second before standing up. She walked back to her filing cabinet, pulled out another folder, and dropped it onto the desk. This is a list of women's shelters and legal aid organizations. You'll find protection here. Emily's throat tightened. I don't need a shelter. I need to make sure he can't find me. Victoria studied her. There's only one way to do that. Emily swallowed. Which is? Victoria's voice was steady, firm. You need to make him think you're already gone. Emily's breath caught. Victoria leaned in. We create a paper trail. We make it look like you left the state. You close your accounts here, withdraw everything in cash, and we move your records somewhere else. We make him believe you disappeared. Emily's mind reeled. It was risky, but maybe, just maybe, it could work. Then, a sharp knock at the door made them both freeze. Victoria's eyes darted to the clock. The bank is closed. No one should be here. Emily's entire body stiffened. Victoria stood slowly, moving toward the door. She peered through the glass panel. Her face darkened. Emily's breath caught. Who is it? Victoria turned back, her voice barely above a whisper. It's him. Emily's heart stopped. Her body tensed, every muscle locking in place as if freezing would make her invisible. But it wouldn't. He was here, just outside the door. Victoria kept her stance firm, shoulders squared as she turned back toward Emily. Stay quiet, she mouthed. Emily's pulse roared in her ears. She barely dared to breathe. A second knock, harder this time. Then, excuse me. The voice on the other side of the door sent ice through Emily's veins. Daniel. His voice was as smooth as ever, deceptively calm. But she knew the truth. Beneath that controlled tone was a man who never accepted no for an answer. Victoria didn't open the door. The bank is closed for the day, sir. Her voice was professional, unwavering. You'll need to return during business hours. Silence. Then the slow turn of the doorknob. Locked. Emily clenched her hands into fists, forcing herself to stay rooted in place. Daniel chuckled, a low, calculated sound. Oh, I think you can make an exception. Victoria's face didn't change. Not without an appointment. Another silence. Then, a shift. A shadow moved under the door, pacing. Emily could picture him perfectly. Tall, broad, standing just outside with that same smug expression he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. I just need a moment of your time, he continued. You see, I'm looking for someone. A woman. A thief, actually. Emily's stomach twisted. Victoria crossed her arms. And what does that have to do with this bank? Daniel exhaled through his nose, amusement laced in his tone. Because I have a strong feeling she's been through here. Recently. Victoria didn't flinch. We don't disclose client information. Another pause. Then, a sharp bang against the door. Emily flinched. Daniel's voice darkened. You see, I have a way of getting what I want. So I'll ask one more time. Have you seen her? Victoria met Emily's gaze briefly before turning back to the door. Sir, if you don't leave, I'll be forced to call security. Silence. Then, the sound of footsteps retreating. Emily barely dared to believe it. Was he really leaving? Victoria waited, her breath even, before cautiously stepping toward the window. She peered outside. Gone. Emily sagged in relief, but it was short-lived. He'll be back, Victoria muttered, turning back to her. Men like him don't give up that easily. Emily swallowed hard. Then what do I do? Victoria hesitated for only a second before grabbing a set of keys from her drawer. You don't go home. You don't go anywhere familiar. I have a safe place. You'll stay there until we figure out the next step. Emily blinked. Why are you helping me? Victoria's expression finally softened. Just a little. Because years ago, someone helped me when I needed it. Emily didn't ask what that meant. She just nodded. Victoria grabbed her coat and motioned for Emily to follow. We go out the back. Quietly. Emily took one last look at the bank, the place where her past had caught up to her. Then she turned and walked away. For now she was safe. But Daniel wasn't done looking. And she knew this wasn't over.